welcome to Do This, Not That, when your doctors are walking out the door. It's a special series for you on physician retention, recruitment, and well-being. And you know it all has to do something with physician engagement. Now, according to American Medical Association, in 2021, 117,000 doctors left the profession. That's like 15% of the workforce. And a new survey says another 20% are planning to leave in the next 2 years. Are you having any of these problems with your doctors? Do you want them to stay and give their best and even help you recruit other doctors? Now, do you see any of this as an opportunity to increase well-being and lower burnout? If you said yes to any of these questions, I have good news for you. We have special video series for you on physician retention, recruitment, and well-being. This is Healthcare Leadership Insider, and this program is for healthcare leaders who care about their doctors and the survival of their organization, essentially our whole profession. This isn't for a leader who gathers all the information and does nothing. So, and you already know that I am a proud co-author of this twin project that comes like once a generation, the Enhanced Physician Engagement book, which is published by American College of Healthcare Executives, Part 1 and Part 2. And today, we have a special treat for you. We have one of my proud co-authors, Kalen Stanton. Hi, Kalen.
Hello, hello.
All righty. And Kalen Stanton is an MBA. He's the Managing Director for Healthcare Transformation at Root, which is a global management consultancy and is a part of Accenture. He holds an MBA from Vanderbilt University. He previously led health systems and physician practice innovation partnerships at Advisory Board. He was Chief of Staff for Southwind Health Partners. He focuses on intersection of strategy and culture with executive leaders across the clinical continuum of providers and all the key stakeholders. He also plays a role in many international change efforts, not only at Root, but also at a not-for-profit organization called Global Connections. So welcome.
Thank you, thank you. I'm excited about the conversation today.
Yes. And Kalen's chapter is in book 1. So this is the book 1, which is What is Physician Engagement, Why You Need It, and Where to Begin. Usually that's the one thing that people struggle with the most is how to conceptualize it, but where to begin. And this also shows you the depth of these two books. Now, Kalen's chapter is visual and participative concepts that apply to physician engagement. Absolute gold. Let's see. Okay, so Kalen, tell us about the chapter.
Yeah, so because obviously I'm not a physician myself, and nor can I create these really amazing paintings, art, diagrams, frameworks that we come up with so often at Root. So what value do I bring? I'm not really sure, but my role in this chapter was really telling a story and sharing from experience how visualization, the use of that visualization in the right context and with the right audience, and then putting that in the context of business and culture can be tremendously impactful to an organization, in particular, our physicians and provider audiences. And the way I liken it so often is that we have in healthcare, especially our physicians out there, from both their training and experience and just who they are, we have some of the smartest people on the planet walking around being given instructions for how to change healthcare from someone else. And so why not go about that in a more participatory manner where everybody can see that big picture and see their part in it, and in fact, help author that. Yeah. So that's a lot of what the chapter is about.
So, I mean, how did you even think of this topic?
So actually, so at Root, we, which has been around for some time, we do a lot of work, like you said, at the intersection of strategy and people and results in almost every industry. My passion is in healthcare, But why this is so important in the conversation with physicians is that I've seen the power of taking systems thinking and putting that together with visualization to help move people to a different mindset, a shared mindset, and then a way of doing, a way of acting as a result. And once you see the power of that, it's really hard not to bring it into every part of what you're doing, especially when it relates to getting large numbers of people to change.
What do you think? I mean, when Carson Dye approached you about this, what were you trying to convey the most, like number one takeaway in this chapter?
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, and Carson has long been a believer, thankfully, in a lot of how we at Root do what we do, but especially this concept of visualization. He uses it quite a bit himself and very effectively. And so I think when we got to talking about what we'll share here, it was taking a lot of great expertise across the rest of the book and saying, okay, great, but how do we see how these pieces fit together? And that's a big part of the value that visualization can bring, is you can see the box top. So in the chapter, we have this one visual that shows people on a journey. And in fact, that's what's behind me on the wall. And what it's doing is it's bringing a lot of very necessary, valuable pieces of a strategy, or of my role as a physician on the team or in the organization, and it's bringing it into view together. And so I think with Carson, we were trying to see how can we boil down the why, what, and how of this approach into a way that our physician readers here can understand, can really turn over and think about how it would apply in their context, and then adapt or adopt that in whatever manner might be relevant to an initiative or a focus of theirs right now.
I think that's the diagram you're talking about. I shared the screen for that. Is that the one you're talking about?
That's it. And yeah, so you can see it almost looks like a storybook journey here. But I've had CEOs, 10, 12 CEOs standing around this very image, chief medical officers standing together around this image and having very robust conversation, an honest conversation about how they are approaching the right level of scale for their healthcare delivery model, how they're innovating at the intersection of physicians and technology. What role does diversity play in that, and even diversity of their business? And how does that impact quality, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And so even just, I'm not sharing a PowerPoint, we're not reading through anything right now, right? I'm just describing a picture. So that's one of the reasons we use this. And what we're looking at here is we could spend an hour talking about our strategy just looking at this visual.
So usually when you describe this visual, where do you start? Where do you want the reader to look at first?
Yeah. So, and this is just an example, right, of more of a journey. I think what we're asking people when we stand in front of a visual, or we put it out on the table and we look at it together, and it could represent anything. It could represent, a strategy here for our organization, or maybe it could be the way we're thinking about how does population health work in the next decade? What are the puzzle pieces and how do they connect? Whatever this is that we're looking at, it's we are getting all the puzzle pieces on the table, first of all, so that we see the big picture. We see the system, right?
I see, yeah.
That's how physicians will think about anything appropriately, is how does it connect to the system? And then, though, we're going to say, all right, now that we've given you what we think it is, you as a human being are going to reflect back on it, what it means to you. It's like going to an art museum, right? What happens when you look at a piece of art? The artist has informed it with something very important. That's why it's there. But you are the other part of it. And the meaning comes from the way you reflect back on that. And we do the same thing here when it comes to strategy or culture or really important concepts that we're trying to move ourselves and others forward with.
I think you hit upon something very good, because when you gave example of the art museum, it is absolutely participatory.
Right.
Otherwise, you're not drawn into it. But
Right.
I like one very solid point you make in the chapter, which is that especially in a business or a corporate context, we start missing the emotion,
Mm-hmm.
and the visualizations can bring emotion
Right.
like nothing else. I want to absolutely share these diagrams you have in this chapter.
Yeah.
It just makes its own point. You don't have to even think about it. These
Right.
diagrams, this series of diagrams, look at them. Tell us about them.
Well, and how about let me ask you?
Uh-huh.
Look, Harjit, what's happening in these pictures? If you look at the first one, what do you think happened there?
Well, these two guys are trying to chase the mammoth, and obviously
Okay,
they're trying to eat it, I guess.
probably,
Or
right?
the mammoth was causing some destruction, so they are trying to be safe from the mammoth. So
Probably both, right? And then what happens
yes,
in the next picture?
yes, and now the mammoth is chasing them back,
That's
and they're
right.
both scared and running away. The guy in the front has even let go of his spear, doesn't care about the spear anymore. He's running, and those little things that show that he's running very fast, like the wind. That's so
Right.
beautiful.
Well, why do you need a spear anymore when you already outran your colleague, right? I mean, job
That's
done.
right. That's
So,
right.
and then the third one, I think, so
Yes.
right down here, what happens?
So somehow they figured out how to kill the mammoth, and now are cooking, and there's a dance party going on.
Right.
And obviously, so now they are gonna have good time. So there is celebration going on in this picture.
That's right. That's right. And so yeah, once again, they say a picture tells 1,000 words, right? And yet we've been doing this for thousands of years.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And humans, use visualization to tell stories more so than anything.
mm-hmm,
We do this so that, well, like the art museum, hopefully we can appreciate it.
mm-hmm,
But because we're human, we're also thinking about what can this affect, right? So when you apply that to medicine and say, how do we use visualization to affect something?
mm-hmm,
Well, let's take all of the most important pieces and parts that we need to work with, and let's bring them together. What would that look like? And then
mm-hmm,
to your point, how would we experience that? We're emotional just as much as we are intellectual. And so as we think about leading human beings, including physicians, and engaging them in any process of change, we're going to have to tap into both sides of the brain, right? That's the way you get human beings to change. Because if you look throughout history, whenever we do big things well, we don't call it an initiative. We don't call it even a change necessarily. We don't call it a project. We call it a movement, right? We do things worth remembering. It's because people wanted to be a part of it. And that's because it was in both parts of their brain. Intellectually, they understood that we couldn't stay where we are right now. The mammoth is coming. Or there's a place that we need to get to that's better. It's over that horizon. So they understood the facts, but there was also an emotional calling to it. What is it going to be worth in the end? Is it worth doing now? Is it worth doing later? Can we wait it out? Well, no, because why? We're scared to death of this mammoth, right? So it is
Yes.
both intellectual and emotional.
I think let's look at it from the bigger context of the book itself. What would you like a leader to know about physician engagement and how to enhance it using visualization?
Well, I think, tell me if this has ever been said before.
Mhm,
What we often see as the start of that conversation, what I'd like to say are questions like, does our leadership share with us everything we need to know to make decisions? Or do we have access to all the information or a single source of truth, all that good stuff? Do we have the big picture, or are we just told what we need to know, right? Do we have an understanding, even if we have a moment of honesty? Do we each have an understanding?
Have an answer for that. Is there something else I can help with?
But Siri does. Do we have an understanding of every part of our business that could affect the choices that we're making, whether it's in our practice, our department, with our faculty? Do we have all the information available to us to know that we're making choices that contribute in the right way to the success of our collective mission? Usually the answer to those kinds of questions is no, if you ask someone. And so I think that's the first and foremost way to think about visualization, is how, and participation, is that we give everybody the big picture. What's the big picture of where are we going? Why are we going there? How are we going to be successful? And what is it you're actually asking us to do?
Do you have a favorite story about this, where you helped somebody visualize and then present? So, the effect was totally different than sharing numbers and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have a real passion for academic medicine in particular. And so one of these stories is a very large, rather successful health system, academic health system, was going through a lot of change. They had a new strategy. So they'd spent some time with some really smart folks creating a new strategy over about 5 or 6 months. They were working on their brand. They had a new CEO who was about to start in a month. And by the way, different versions of medical groups across that big footprint that they needed to bring together in a way that they felt like they were one group of physicians and providers. And so as we looked at this situation, and we knew, hey, we're going to have to get tens of thousands of people into a shared mindset about how we're going to change and why we're going to change. What we first and foremost did is we created one picture of the current state, outside and in, just if you looked across the industry from where they were. And so we looked at, hey, here are the different changes in consumer preferences or demographics. How many people are getting older at what rate? All these things that we talk about or that we see on a day-to-day when that patient walks in the door. But looking at scale, right? Who are our competitors? They're actually not who they used to be 10 years ago. What's happening with NIH grant funding? All these things that, again, we have conversations about in pockets, but we bring it all together into one visual, one picture. So we just stood around the table and we looked at it, the board, their leadership, their clinical leadership, the School of Medicine and the chairs, and they just looked at this picture and said, what would we do about it? And we had data. So it wasn't just a picture. We had actual fact statistics for each one of these dynamics, these themes, that together created a very compelling case for change, but not just for someone's individual behavior, for them to see, oh, this is how we as an organization need to lead in the future. So that was a case for change, if you will. And then from there, we said, all right, what is it we want? What are we going to do about this when we think about the expertise we're each bringing to the table, clinical, non-clinical, strategy, et cetera. And so then we had flipped the visual. We had a picture of essentially the why, what, and how of their strategy and their culture and their operating model. And so we started this process. We ended up taking 2,000 leaders through it. We started with the board of each of the hospitals and the system. And my favorite moment when we went through these visuals, but also having meaningful dialogue about it, The chair of this department with one of our up and coming physician leaders in another department, just really rich dialogue, bringing their expertise to the table. One of the chairs stands up in this room of about 300 board members and physician leaders, and they said, I've been a part of this organization for a long time. We've done some amazing things, but I've never been more proud to be a part of this system than I am today. And why? It was because, one, they could see the big picture, literally see the big picture. And two, it was theirs. They had weighed in, they had advanced it, bringing what they bring to the table every day, but this time to the strategic conversation.
That's such a nice example. In fact, as you were speaking, I was thinking that organizations talk about their vision and they never draw it.
Right.
There's
What
like
is it you
one,
see?
yeah, our vision is we will be the biggest organization in the Midwest or whatever, and they never draw it.
Right.
So that's such a strange thing.
It is, and we often ask people, if leaders in particular, if your people could see what you see, how might they behave differently? How might they think differently?
Yeah. Well, that is such a wonderful thing to conclude our discussion with, that if the doctors could see what the leader is trying to say, and imagine how the engagement will be enhanced by just visualizing that. Well, thank you very much for, educating me, educating everybody who's watching this. And as you already know, that these two spirit guides, the first book on the strategy and the second one on tactics, these two work together. And the visualization probably goes in both. If you can't draw and explain it like that, it's going to be very, very difficult to enhance any engagement in physicians. And as you already know, engaging physicians is not a luxury, but a necessity for your survival today. So each of these our episodes are for you. Please like them, share them, subscribe them. Thank you.